Hello, welcome to Sidebar, behind the scenes at WFAE. This is episode 2. My name is Jeff Bundy. Each week I'm going to be interviewing a different member of the WFAE news or production team to give you a behind the scenes glimpse of Charlotte's NPR news source. Like so many people, I and my guest today are both working remotely. We're not at our normal offices. We're coming to you today from our homes and recording this interview through Zoom. So you may hear some background noise, lawnmowers going, dogs barking, kids playing. Hopefully we won't have any surprise special guests, but that might happen. Who knows? We're kind of figuring this out as we go. On the topic of special guests, my guest today has frankly been putting his own health and safety on the line, providing coverage of the Charlotte region's response to the coronavirus outbreak, filing some really amazing and important reports over these last few weeks. David Boraks is a reporter and host at WFAE, covering energy and the environment, politics and government, affordable housing, transportation, and many other topics. He's a veteran Charlotte area journalist who's also worked at The Observer. He's published the online community news network davidsonnews.net and corneliusnews.net. He also reported for the American Banker and worked at the Cambridge Chronicle, the Hartford Courant, and was an editor at the China News in Taipei. David Boraks, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with me today.
Hello, Jeff.
Thank you. So David, about a month ago, we had an all-staff meeting at WFAE when the decision was made for staff to start working remotely, for reporters to start filing stories from home. And you made it pretty clear in that meeting that, come hell or high water, one way or the other, you were going to be out on the streets covering this coronavirus outbreak. And I keep seeing these photos of you that you're posting on your social media accounts of you, riding the train in full protective gear, interviewing people, as you can see in that photo, interviewing people with boom mics at a safe distance. You're getting out there, you're putting yourself on the front lines to cover this story. What is it in your nature that makes you willing to rush towards danger like this? Because this isn't the first time you've gone out of your way to report from the front lines of a breaking story like this.
Jeff, I'm not sure. I don't see it as rushing toward danger, although I suppose you could see it that way. I mean, I'm doing what I've always done, which is trying to get out and get the story. And our job as journalists is, whatever the situation, to dog the story until we get it. I mean, you could think of any number of situations that a journalist might be in where in some cases they may be dangerous because of weather. In some cases they may be a little bit treacherous because of the people you're working with. It might just be working with a government bureaucracy that doesn't want to give up any information. You just got to dog the story. And I think that's the way we do it. And if there's a big story happening, it's not our job to shrink from it.
Mm. Yeah, well, the reason I said you've been covering, just in recent memory, stories that you've been all over, where you have put yourself at risk. It wasn't that long ago that you rented a truck and drove to the coast to cover Hurricane Florence, and you were kind of stranded there for days, if I'm not mistaken.
I was actually. I just want to say a little bit more about going towards danger. I mean, you can prepare, and I think whenever I go into these situations, I try to do everything I can to make sure that I'm safe, and I don't typically put myself into situations where I feel like I am at any kind of real risk. For example, I drive a small Honda Fit, and when it came time to go cover Hurricane Florence in 2016, that just wasn't going to cut it. So getting a pickup that had, high wheels and the possibility of going through high water made sense at that time. So I prepared myself for that. I mean, other than that, I did drive through some high water. We were sleeping in the radio station at WHQR at the time, and it stunk like a locker room, but I don't think any of those was a danger that wasn't what many of us would do. And I think that that's what we have to do to get the story. And you end up in situations where you see things that are happening out there and they turn into, incredible stories. I'm just thinking about one situation with Florence where I pulled up, this was in Whiteville, down in eastern part of the state, and pulled up was sent off the highway because the highway was closed off because of water on it. Went to the side road. The side road had a lake running across it. And I sat there for, 20, 25 minutes. Other people drove up and turned around. A couple of guys with trucks came and they drove across it. And then this National Guard unit showed up with a high water rescue team, and they all walked out into it and took a look at it. And they said they were going across. And that ended up becoming part of a story, but it also was my cue that, look, if I'm ever going to get across this, the best time to go is when I'm with all these rescue folks. So I think, you can watch and pick your openings pretty carefully in those situations. And they also become great sound for stories on the radio and great images for our web stories.
Yeah, well, you said, David, that many of us, you are, yes, I just want to emphasize, you are doing everything in your power to keep yourself safe in all of these situations. But you said many of us, will willingly rush into these situations. I can think for myself, I don't know if I would, rent a pickup truck and drive towards the storm. I don't know if I would right now, put on protective gear and interview people on a train, or the story you did last week where you reported from the homeless encampment near uptown Charlotte. Just really compelling and important reporting that I don't think everyone would be willing. When you say many of us, you mean journalists like you.
Definitely.
There are a lot of people, myself included, who maybe wouldn't do that. So, I having worked in many newsrooms in my career, worked with many journalists in my career, this thing that I've observed about journalists like you is that it's, this isn't a job. This isn't, like a 9-to-5 thing where you clock in and you can't wait for the day to end. This is really a calling. So can you talk to me about what called you to journalism?
This is exactly why I got into journalism. My own story is kind of cute. I delivered newspapers as a kid in Connecticut. I delivered 2 different newspapers at different times, and one of them was an afternoon newspaper. And I remember so keenly that if I was late with the paper, there were people there waiting for it. They wanted what I had. And I picked up on that, as a 10 or 11-year-old, that there was something here that people absolutely had to have. And when I would go into the newspaper to pay my bill on Saturday mornings, I got to walk through the newsroom and see the printing press. And as you know, I was a print journalist for most of my career, and that kind of really sucked me in. But the idea that we journalists are gathering information and giving it to people, and it's something that they need and want, is really what drove me to get into the business initially. And it's what drives me to go out right now and cover these stories. I feel like, if I don't do this, who's going to do this? If, there is a story out there about, to use your example, the homeless in Charlotte. They're camped. You can see the office towers. There are some sad but amazing stories out there that we need to get. It's part of the big picture of what's going on here in Charlotte right now amid the coronavirus crisis. And I feel like it's an imperative to do it. And so as I get ready to do those things, as I said, I take all the precautions I can. And there may be an element of risk there, but I guess I'm weighing the importance of the story with the risk that I'm taking.
Yeah, I pulled up a photo here from your story from that homeless encampment. So the questions that I had, particularly around that story, is how did you first become aware of what was happening there, and then what were the challenges that you had to face to file that story?
So I've been covering the homeless issue since before the coronavirus hit. And of course, one of the themes that's emerging in my coverage, and one of the things that I'm really trying to bring home with some of these stories, is that the coronavirus crisis is magnifying some of the underlying social problems that we have in North Carolina and in the country. And stories like this really get at that. And so I had already been covering homeless issues before this, affordable housing, that sort of thing. I had been planning since December to make an outing with this one particular group called Watchmen of the Streets. It's a ministry based in Cornelius, but they go into homeless communities, every week or every couple of weeks and deliver sleeping bags and food and that sort of thing. So because of other stories and vacations, that story got put off until January, February. And in in late February, I had a date lined up to go do this, and then the whole coronavirus thing happened. And so it just so happened that my trip out with these folks for the first time was coinciding with this crisis. And so at that time, it added an element of urgency to what they were doing and to my story. And so I ended up doing 2 stories out of that first trip out there. One of them was how the coronavirus is affecting the homeless community. And, you can read the stories and listen to the stories and find out more about that. But basically, there are more people on the street right now. Many of the programs have pulled back, and the food programs are not doing the seated meals that they're used to be doing. The homeless shelters are trying to do social distancing, so they're not admitting as many people every night. All of these things combine to make it more difficult. And then on top of that, a lot of these people that live on the street, they have jobs, and many of these people are losing their jobs. So the lifeline that they were looking for that might lift them out of that horrible situation they're in is completely taken away. So one of my stories looked at it from that angle. The other story looked at this group, Watchmen of the Streets, and what they are doing, and a kind of a broader look at homeless people and how they're human beings. And they get out there, they meet these people, they befriend them, and they tell their stories and try to portray them as human beings. And I think my second story tried to do that. Then I heard that through the grapevine of folks that I'd met, that some of these encampments were being cleared out by the police. And so another afternoon I went out, and that photograph that you showed earlier of all the tents lined up outside of the urban ministry was the result of some of those camps being closed down. People went and they put their tents in a place they thought would be safe for a while. And I have talked to the folks at the urban ministry, and they've said, this is not an ideal situation, but we are not going to kick these people out of here right now. And in fact, the Centers for Disease Control has recommended that communities not try to clean up homeless encampments right now because of this situation that we're in, that everybody needs to kind of stay where they are. So those stories of those folks are just, they bring tears to your eyes.
Well, it's really important journalism, showcasing how this virus is affecting people at all socioeconomic levels, all people in the Charlotte community impacted by this. Relating kind of to the work we've been doing over the last, I think, 18 months on our Finding Home series, you filed a lot of stories for that project as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So Finding Home is a project that we started in early 2019, and the idea was to write a story every week for a year about the broader issue of affordable housing in Charlotte. As people know, upward mobility is really limited here. In one study a few years ago, we came out 50th out of 50 large cities in the U.S. for upward mobility, and one element of that is stable housing. And the city has been trying to come up with some strategies for dealing with this issue. And so we've looked at everything from neighborhoods that are in transition, that are being gentrified, or those that are in danger of being gentrified. We've looked at programs that are trying to help, for example, a program that helps families with school-age children, programs that help teens and people in their early 20s who have no place to go. We've done stories about, programs that take in families and give them a stable situation and help them find work and that sort of thing. So all of these stories are aimed at looking at all different angles on this broader issue. We've covered the policy side of it. We covered the human stories behind it. And I'm happy to say that we are continuing that series again here in 2020 in order to get at as much of it as we can.
Well, I know you're really busy, so I'm gonna start wrapping this up. I want to thank you again for your time. But before I let you go, a couple things that I wanted to ask you about. First, I maybe should have started the conversation with this. How are you and your family doing through all of this personally?
We're doing great. In the middle of all of this, my wife was actually in Taipei, Taiwan on a fellowship. She originally was in Shanghai. She went back to Taipei. And so she was over there kind of at ground zero for a while. Taiwan actually handled this pretty well. So she was in pretty good shape, but she did come back early from that fellowship. And so now 4 of us are here, my older daughter, my younger daughter who's back from American University, And so the four of us are here every day, you know, taking classes, doing Zoom meetings and all that sort of thing. But everybody is well at the moment, and happy to say that.
I believe you're also keeping yourself busy making masks, right?
So there is a mask making operation going on elsewhere in my house, and the sewing machines have been going, you know, all day long every day. It's my wife and eldest daughter, Emma, and they've been making masks for folks in our community here. I live in Davidson. They've been helping out folks who don't have them. For example, the pharmacy staff at the CVS here in Davidson did not have masks. They were told to go out and get them themselves somewhere. The post office, some of the restaurants here, faculty and staff people at Davidson College, friends of ours. Some of them have gone to healthcare workers in Charlotte through other organizations that are distributing masks. My wife actually right now is working on another project to make covers for N95 masks so that that can extend the life of those scarce N95 masks that the people on the front lines are wearing. So I think they've done a few hundred masks right now, and there's more happening every day.
Certainly keeping yourself busy. How are you? I know you're a really active guy in the normal world. You normally do pickup soccer games. Assuming you can't do pickup soccer right now, how are you keeping yourself fit and healthy?
Oh man, Jeff, this is just killing me to not be able to go out of the house. You know, I play pickup soccer a few times a week, and there was some debate in our games about whether we should keep playing, and I think it was the county shutdown of the parks that finally closed down the game. But you know, I do a morning workout every day. I try to get out and walk if I can. I am really trying to stay as active as I can. Looking forward to the day when I can get back out there on the field.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to those days. David, before I let you go, just one last thing. What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now, and how can WFAE listeners, how can viewers of this video maybe help out?
You know, the biggest challenge we face is getting at some of these stories without all of the usual tools and contacts. I mean, one of the things I do a lot of is go out to meetings and to places in the community, and I talk to people, and I just can't do it. It seems like all of my conversations with folks now are scheduled in a Zoom meeting or a phone call of some kind. If people have ideas for stories, please feed them to us. We have, you know, call me on the phone, send me an email. We have a telephone call-in that you can find on the website where we're soliciting stories from people that my colleagues and I are looking into. So I'd say that is the biggest challenge right now, and that's where people can help.
There's a general email address for the newsroom, right?
News@WFAE.org is a great place to start.
Okay. Well, thank you, David, so much for your time as your time today to speak with me, and as a colleague, a listener of WFAE. Thank you also so much for the vitally important work that you're doing right now. I know you don't see that you're putting yourself at risk, and I know you are doing everything you can to keep yourself safe. But I'm so thankful for the work that you're doing, and the fact that you're putting yourself out there to file these just compelling, engaging, and again, vitally important stories for everyone here in the Charlotte region. David's work, the work of all of the reporters, journalists, producers at WFAE, it's made possible through listener support. If you've enjoyed this interview, if you've enjoyed the reports you've heard from David over the last few weeks, or the last few years, if you have found value in them, if they have given you the information you've needed to keep you and your family safe, we do hope that you'll call in to support this important work. You can do that at 704-549-9000 or at WFAE.org. Again, my name is Jeff Bundy. This was the second episode of our Sidebar series. If you have any comments or suggestions on the series, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is jbundy@WFAE.org. Let me know who else from the WFAE newsroom you'd like to hear from. Any questions you may have from them, I would love to get your input. Again, thanks so much for tuning in to this. Thanks so much for your continued support of WFAE. Stay tuned and stay safe.